Chief. How are you? It's a little retreat cruise over Memorial Weekend, and been doing that for years. So we'll be doing that.
Where are you going?
It's always to the Bahamas.
Oh, gotcha.
It's the same year after year, but we've managed to. Well, it's got them talked into going on a 4.
I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Waxhaw Board of Commissioners for Tuesday, April 9th, 2019. If you would, please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for a brief moment of silence. Thank you. Okay, in terms of adoption of the agenda, we are going to add 2 small items. They're actually 2 separate closed sessions. One, to discuss the acquisition of real property pursuant to N.C.G.S. 143-318.11A5. And then the second one would be to discuss personnel-related matters pursuant to N.C.G.S. 143-318, where the board's doing their administrative responsibility with completing the input on the manager's assessment. Other than that, we have no additional items. I'll entertain, does anybody else have anything? I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
We have no public comments pertaining to items on this agenda, so we'll move to the consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and again, it may to the audience may seem like the agenda is light. We've been here since 4:30. We put staff put a lot of work into bringing forward some significant items into the work session, so we could have a good collaborative discussion. So there's been a lot of work that's been accomplished today. With that, I'd like to call up Matt Hubert.
Want to be my pleasure again to present another position we've been able to fill, the fire marshal position. We got Kevin Starnes. He comes to us from Charlotte. He's got full experience in being able to fill the role that the town has to serve, and I'm excited to bring him aboard. And got a few things to say.
Hey, nice to meet everyone, and I'm excited as well. It's been a dream of mine ever since I've been a fire inspector in the fire service to be a fire marshal of a town, and I look forward to growing the fire marshal's office and keeping the community safe for any visitors and employees and residents of the town. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Welcome aboard. Thank you. Ms. Sabinski?
Some fast moving. Here we go. I am here tonight to bring up Miss Amy Merrill, and Miss Lisa Hoffman's going to come up as well. She is at her 5-year service award, so we would like to congratulate her. Amy is an awesome team player and an asset to the Park and Rec department, and I'd just like to say thank you, and on behalf of the town, here's your 5-year service award.
Congratulations, Amy. Okay, the meat part of the agenda tonight is the audit presentation for fiscal year 17 and 18. To do that, David Phillips, partner from Green Finney, will come up and present. David, welcome.
Thank you. All right, I think you probably have several trees in front of you, several reports in front of you. You know, we have the big white report. That's the financial statements. In the old days, we would try to flip through that and discuss it, and that didn't go so well. So, you know, as time has gone on, we've kind of, developed a PowerPoint where we try to go through and hit the highlights. But I want to make sure as we go through that, if you have questions, please interject, or if you want to wait to the end, that is great as well. We're in the final stages, so that like after tonight, if y'all approve the report, we plan to submit it on to the Local Government Commission. They'll look at it, and then hopefully they'll say everything's good, and it'll get officially bound into a nice, more final version than what you're seeing today. All right, well, let's look at this PowerPoint. A couple things that we always like to remind everybody is the importance of internal controls. It's important that one person can't do everything within an organization, that there's checks and balances. So some of the things that we do as your auditors is that we try to look at your significant internal control process. Now, you notice I didn't say every control process. I said the significant ones, where the significant dollars are coming in the organization, and we try to make sure that those controls look reasonable. And let's just say, for example, we were looking at your cash and we didn't see bank recs were being done. Well, that's important that management know, but it's also important that you know. Because how can you fix something if you don't know it's broken? So again, we're looking at those type of things. The next thing here too is that these are your financial statements, and we're here to audit those. And so one of the things I wanted to highlight, as I mentioned before, a little bit about controls, is that why controls are important is because it helps prevent fraud. And so they've done all these case studies on fraud, and what they have found is that for fraud to occur, 3 things must exist. The first item, there has to be a need in somebody's life to commit a fraud. Maybe that need is, I have a whole bunch of medical bills. Maybe my daughter's going off to college and I can't afford it. Okay, so there's a need in somebody's life. The second item has to be, there has to be a rationalization in that person's mind of why it's okay to steal. Sometimes that rationalization is, you know what, I haven't gotten a raise in 5 years and it's just not fair. Sometimes the rationalization is, you know what, I work harder than Susie and Susie makes more money than me. The only item on that triangle that you or any business or government or entity has any control over is the opportunity. I can't, change somebody's need. I can't necessarily know when someone's rationalizing in their mind why it's okay. But I can make the opportunity so difficult so they wouldn't want to try it on my watch. And so that's why it's important to have strong internal controls, and that's why your staff, they're processing thousands and thousands of transactions. It's important that there's such checks and balances. Okay, that's just a little bit of an overview on fraud. We're going to move on to the next thing. Our responsibility as your auditors is to audit the financial statements and to issue an opinion. We look at things from a materiality perspective. So think about materiality if you of about 2%. So if you have $100 and you're wanting us to catch a dime, our procedures are not designed to catch that. But if it was $5, I hope our procedures would always catch that. And the reason why the way it's been set up, if you wanted us to catch a dime, that'd be like a super audit. And your audit fee would be about 10 times what it is. And so what they've tried to do is they've tried to scale it back to like a 95% level of assurance so that you can get a reasonable assurance of an A. You can't necessarily get an A+, but but at the same time it's at a reasonable price. And that's kind of the way the audit structure has always been designed. The best thing here on the very bottom bullet point there is that you have an unmodified opinion. That's the best opinion you can get. That's what most people get. But what that means is that we're not aware of anything being materially wrong. And that's the key. There could be some small things. We all are aware. We're not going to worry about a dime here or a couple dollars here. But the good thing is we're not aware of anything being materially misstated in these financial statements. All right, well, let's look at, I guess, the real key thing here is your general fund. Your total fund balance increased about $600,000. You have restricted fund balance because of the stabilization by state statute of about $870,000. And you have a little bit of non-spendable. So when you take those restricted and non-spendable components out, we look at this next slide where it's your unassigned. Those are the funds where there's no constraints. Those monies are available for you as council, as a board of commissioners, to decide what you want to do with. And that unassigned balance was $4.63 million, which was about 48% of your 2018 actual expenditures, and it's about 42% of your 2019 budgeted expenditures. Remember, the town has adopted a minimum fund balance policy of where you're trying to keep 30 to 40%. And so the good thing is you see you're above those targets. Now, as time goes on, we'll be able to put some more prior years there, but it was not so easy to do that this year. And so we're going to move on over and look briefly here at your general fund revenues. Just going to hit the highlights there. They were a total of $11.22 million. The biggest piece there being ad valorem taxes of about 6.7. You had unrestricted intergovernmental revenue of about $3 million, and then you see those other categories. I mean, you really came in right on budget. I mean, that is pretty unbelievably close of $4,000 to what you budgeted, and there's the slight variances there on the bottom. Now we're going to move over to your general fund expenditures. They totaled $9.63. We list the biggest functions, of course, being the biggest, what we see in almost all governments is public safety. It was 2.51. But then you also had about 1.7 million in general government, 1.77 in economic and community development, and then those other categories. Your expenditures came in under budget. And you know, honestly, the one thing, if I'm a board, that I care the most about is that if I approved a budget, I want to see that management adhere to that budget. And if they want more money, or if they need more money because of certain issues, they need to come back to me and approve it and get us to approve it. So I wanted to show you where that statement was in here in the financials, because it'd be hard to find. But I wanted to point it out to you. Turn to page 20 in this big fat white report. And so if you ever kind of wanted to look where this data is coming from on this slide, that's where it's coming from. And you can kind of see how you did from the original to final to actual budget. And it gives you a really good picture as a board member to kind of see how you did. The good thing here, again, as we mentioned, is that all of your departments actually came under their approved budgets. And that was really good. Your management really at the end of the year really did some cost-cutting measures to really try to not spend anything that wasn't needed. And that's where a lot of this comes through. But also think about when you budget for a person for a whole year. Well, that person, sometimes a vacancy happens. It may take 6 months to hire somebody. And so there's always sometimes some ebb and flow on your salary and benefits, because not all of your positions are always 100% filled throughout the year. Also this year, remember you transferred out about $1 million for future capital and current capital projects. So that was another thing that you did in fiscal year 2018. All right, well, let's hit some other highlights. We're going to briefly look at your capital assets. Remember, that's your property, plant, and equipment. That's this building. That's also those streets, which a lot of people don't think they're an asset, a capital asset, but they are. So if you look here, you had total capital assets of $52.07 million. They increased about $5 million over the prior year in total. You had additions of 6.72, with the biggest piece being a lot of the street infrastructure that took place. Then you had some of those other categories. But remember, on these statements, if we buy, let's say, a fire truck and it was $1 million, we depreciate it over its estimated useful life. So let's say that fire truck had a 10-year life, it was $1 million, that's $100,000 of depreciation a year. We're doing that to all of your depreciable property. And that's where the total depreciation expense of 1.77 comes from. Remember, now we're looking back now to June 30th. I know you're way into 19, but at June 30th of 2018, there was some construction going on of about $1 million that was in progress, and we list some of those projects that were going on at that time. All right, well, let's look at your long-term obligations. You had a total balance of $6.49 million. They decreased about $550,000. And primarily that is because you made your annual mortgage payments. You just kept paying down on your debt. And then you had some changes in some of these vacation and pension liabilities. And those go up or down slightly every year. Your total mortgage payments for the year that you're in right now, fiscal year 19, is about $530,000, which consists of about $400,000 in principal and about $130,000 of interest. All right, wanted to just highlight, we don't really see a lot of major changes on the auditing front for you. There are some new accounting rules. They've been issuing accounting rules galore over the last 10 or 15 years. And so I wanted just to mention those. They want us to look and make sure that people are recording in the right funds, the right activities. And one of the things they want to look at are fiduciary funds. So if it's not really your money, but you're holding it on behalf of somebody else, are they being reported correctly? The last one there is about leases. And leases are going to be really treated like debt going forward. Not on your general fund, but on those government-wide statements. So if you enter into a long-term lease, they're going to say, you know what? It's not just you pay a rent expense every year. We're going to make you show a liability for the whole amount when you entered into that lease and set up an asset. And we're going to make you pay those payments against the principal on that loan, and we're going to let you amortize the right to use the leased property. So it's going to be a kind of a change, but that doesn't come about until 2021. All right, wanted to mention here, we did not have to do a federal or state audit this year. If you hit over certain thresholds of $500,000 for the state, $750,000 of federal monies, we have to do some special audit work. That did not occur this year. We did have one finding that we wanted to make you aware of. Yes, go ahead.
So curiosity question, when you say federal or state money, grants?
Correct, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes, it'd be like the Powell bill.
Okay.
That's a perfect illustration of the state. But let's say on the federal level, you got CDBG monies or a SAFER grant, or all those would go on the federal side.
So maybe this is more towards Greg, as we get some of the funding from CRTPO, will that trigger some of these larger projects?
It exceeds the limit.
Okay.
And what we try to encourage people too, these limits are based on your fiscal year. If you, for example, had $1 million federal grant, if you could split it between 2 years, guess what? You don't have to have another audit by us. And that saves you money, and it's a lot less pain for everybody. Now, sometimes you don't have a lot of control over how those are spent. Back up here on the item that we were talking about, the one finding, you have grown a lot. I was telling you about all those accounting standards that have changed. Well, Lisa's an extremely good accountant. I've known her for a while, and she really got in there and wanted to kind of fine-tune all your accounting to get it up to the current standards. Now, in total, there were no monies missing. There's nothing like that. She wanted to get the money, the amounts recorded in the right year. So all what was happening was, I needed to get that back in last year. I got to get this one in this year. It was just making sure that everything got put into the right period. Going forward, we shouldn't have any more of these type of issues. So I just kind of wanted you to let you know, but anytime there's an adjustment that affects the prior period, we have to make you aware of it so that you know what has transpired. The last item there is a management letter, and this is a separate letter you have right here. But if there was some things where I disagreed with Greg, or I had a disagreement with the mayor or with Lisa, and we couldn't resolve it, I would have to disclose that in this letter to all of you. So again, this is a pretty boilerplate letter. There's nothing in it. But if there were also recommendations like, you know what, we think you should do this, we might put those type of recommendations. We did not come across of anything significant that we felt like we needed to report to you. All right, the last slide here again, you have an unmodified opinion. I know it's a strange term, but that's a good thing. And you have good financial condition as of June 30th. I know I go quick, but some people like me to go quick because this is boring. So any questions?
Questions from the board? There are no questions, so given that, I would be happy to accept a motion to accept the financial statements as presented. We have a motion to accept. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
I did want to just say thanks to Greg and Lisa and their staff, because, you know, some places we go, it can be very challenging to deal with certain personality types, and they were really good to work with. So that even though it maybe was a little longer for all of us than we wanted to get it issued, but things went well dealing with each other. Great, thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay. And I will commend you. That is about 40 minutes shorter than the previous audit presentation. Okay. Next up, we have no public hearings, old business or new business. Town leadership reports. We'll start with Manager Ferguson.
We got a couple items tonight, and they may be a little bit longer than normal, but the first is the ULI Nivens price status and kind of an update on where we have made some progress since the last discussion. So staff has been working to identify regional developers who have interest in the project, and this will be in addition to local interests that we're already aware of. There's outreach to several that's happened, and several are still evaluating their interest or level of interest at this point. We've had one that's visited so far and reviewed the site twice and has expressed interest. Staff will need to have follow-up discussion with the board and will need some direction as the board evaluates this particular proposed piece of interest, and then also a further discussion about the goals, the project boundaries, the overall structure of a downtown development agreement. We have had interest that was forwarded to you indicating someone who has visited and looked at the particular building, but that does not mean that the process is not still underway, as we've discussed previously. We're trying to gauge interest in the broader market, and then the process would be sit down with the board as we identify multiple parties and present those to you so that the board can engage in that dialogue. But that's not going to prevent somebody who is on their own timeline from possibly submitting a letter of interest or some other communication. So in that vein, we have not put an RFP together because that's a step down the road, and it would be after discussion, dialogue, and some goal setting from the board and some discussion about project boundary areas or project area. The town attorney is interested of the specific letter of interest that we've received so far. We did send out earlier today a summary of feedback that we've received to date about potential uses. Our current tenants are now all on month-to-month lease in the building, and they were made aware of that 18 months ago when this 18-month extension was provided. None have been asked to change their business practices or location or to vacate space by the town, so nothing's really changed there. Town staff, in the meantime, has begun to identify other issues that might come into play during the discussions with any developer, such as sewer capacity. As you're aware, parking lot design behind the building the design is underway, and as soon as we have a design completed, we'll go to construction to maximize those spaces. The good news is that the spaces that are on Church Street are being heavily utilized, and they're almost always full if you drive by there. However, currently the gravel lot at Niven Price is not really being fully utilized on a Friday or Saturday night. So we're in that spring season, good weather this past Friday, Saturday night. If you were there at 6:30, 7:30 on either night, 45 to 60% capacity on that lot. most of the other spaces downtown are utilized, but there are gaps, and there's the ability to utilize those on North Main Street. So we're not at maximum capacity right now during this particular time of the year. Staff will continue to monitor that, and not just in the North Main Street area, but in the other areas of downtown. One note is that the developers that have talked about Niven Price so far really have emphasized the parking lot and the importance of that particular area to the project and to potentially a use that might be a restaurant use. So that really is a nutshell, ULI Niven Price update, kind of where we're at, and we'll continue to work on identifying future or other developers that might have interest. There are developers that are looking at the ULI recommendations, but they're on their own time frame as to whether they want to visit, see the site, go from there. Community corner lot. Parks and Recreation has continued to see high interest and a new higher level of private rental of the lot, and that's going to continue, it looks like, for the foreseeable future, as it's the main open space located downtown. We currently have 16 rentals that are private rentals of the space this year, with more requests that are being responded to ongoing. We've got 19 events that are town-sponsored on the lot. We have looked at and reviewed a partial parking model approach that has been thrown out, and that has been discussed, and we really believe that's not a feasible solution at this point due to, in part, the high interest of rental that we do have on the lot. There's really not a cost-effective way to delineate partial parking lot areas, operate a parking enforcement and clearing operation, and then answer the question why the whole lot can't be used for parking on a periodic basis. Basically, a physical barrier would be needed to delineate one side of the parking lot from the other side of the open space that was there, and that would really divide the space during any public event that presently is scheduled or would occur. The ULI recommendation did include hardscape for an area behind a proposed new building on the corner, but it also included adequate entry and exit control and provisions for future events. A key part of that would be a detailed design with an extensive budget that would be needed to make the area multi-purpose. So if you think about a multi-purpose surface, whether that would be pavers or asphalt or concrete, it would be necessary to lay it out, delineate it, stripe it, and make it available for parking in a multi-purpose role. So Monday through Friday or Monday through noon on Friday, it could be utilized for parking. But if there were an event, there would be a real way to clear the lot and then turn it over in a fairly short period of time for whatever public event might occur there. So we understand the thought and the goal and the desire, but there's really not a short-term solution to do that that's not very expensive and that we have the operational capacity to handle right now. So that's really kind of a report on that. The next one is a UDO update. Work continues on the update primarily by our outside assistants, which is Orion Planning at this point. Our new planning director, Jeff Wells, will join the staff on April 28th and will assume the lead staff role at that point in bringing the Land Development Code update forward. Areas, though, that are currently being worked on in the meantime include signage, trees, administration, schools, and subdivision components of an updated code. So we know of no issues that are currently impacting development in the town at this point based on the existing code. As issues are identified and if needed, staff will bring forward interim steps to address those items as they're brought up. The main issue at this point is the need for internal staff that will be responsible to administer and interpret the code to be on board at the completion and final phases of the code development. Just as a note, and put the process and the project in context, none of the responsible staff in place at the start of this project is employed by the town currently. We have a new town engineer, planning director, interim town attorney, manager, and staff members, as well as a new planning and design firm. Additionally, there are several new commissioners in place that were not part of the board when the project started. This timeline, though, is similar to that large undertaking that a total planning code rewrite takes, as evidenced by similar timelines in Matthews and in Charlotte. So the emphasis is there, the work continues, but we are really awaiting the reassembly of the next phase of our planning team. And so the term new approach really means fresh hands working on. Fresh approach means fresh hands, new hands working on. The goal is still the same, though, is to complete a complete update of the code. Just as a note, I think it is the work product that ultimately will be presented to the board is going to be the best professional, best practices at the time in planning. And it may lack some of the context of what someone may have made a comment 6 years ago or 4 years ago or 5 years ago. So it's just going to be taken in the spirit of the best professional planning work that can be brought forward. At the same time, understanding that there are issues in the downtown code. We know what some of those are. Those absolutely are going to be shared, but it will not have the context of what someone might have said in a public hearing 5 years ago. So the good news is you've got a good group that's being assembled to put their efforts into it. Jeff will be here on the 28th, and he's already getting updates on what happens with this and some of the work effort, and there's coordination going on. So it's high up there on the list. I think that's a fair assessment. The two things that he's going to have to do is 2 new orders of business is complete the hiring process for 2 senior planners. So we have 2 planners in the department right now. We are 3 positions, actually 4 positions short. So the planning director will be here later this month. We have 2 senior planners, and we have a planning tech. So the team needs to be completed, but this is high on his list. Pull the team together and then move the project forward. The dialogue is continuing with Orion Planning as far as timeline and resources needed. So it's not really a matter of do we have resources, it's a matter of do you have the internal staff that actually can review a draft, understand how it would work, and talk through how that could be implemented moving forward. So that they need to get in place and understand the local zoning, the local what is in place as far as our current ordinances, and then how those can be improved.
When you say starting all over, there's been a consultant for the past year, correct? So there's nothing that consultant did that can move forward and we use that?
No, I didn't say start over. I said a fresh approach. I think fresh approach means we've got a new team that's in place now, or coming into place now. The approach that was being utilized wasn't working very well, and that was based on trying to build a West Coast model that was not in touch with the laws and the realities of North Carolina planning. Without judging, for whatever reason, that was the path that was taken several years ago. A better path is really to look at what works in North Carolina, adopt best practices from other localities that have successfully implemented parts and pieces of a planning document, a land use document, and then tailor it to our needs in Waxhaw. So the terminology being used by the previous consultant, the approach, was going to be much longer, and it was probably never going to get the document across the finish line the way it was being handled. So we looked at that as being a model that was not going to lead to success.
Who is the acting zoning administrator with Alex having left?
Currently, Alex is still our interim zoning administrator, and Alex is able to provide that service as a part-time person still through.
Questions? Anybody else have questions?
Two other short items. The public art policy is close to being finalized as a recommendation and would come to the board within the next month, so we expect to see that coming to the board's attention. The WAA agreement, staff is currently awaiting feedback from the WAA, and we'll finalize that as soon as we get feedback and get to a final version of that document, and we'll bring that to the board. And then I believe the last item there is the master plan, which is scheduled for further discussion at our next meeting.
Any questions? Very good. Thank you. Commissioner Westlake? Commissioner Burns?
I just want to give a shout out to our police department. I know that we've seen a lot on Facebook this week where there's been arrest and drug issues in the town that the police have taken care of. Thank you, guys. You put your life on the line every day, and I appreciate it. The town appreciates it.
Here, here.
Commissioner Lee?
Nothing, brother.
Pro Tem? Okay, so I have two items. One, we received a letter of thanks from Richard Shields, the Lodge Secretary for the Waxhaw Lodge number 562, thanking the Board of Commissioners in the town for the facade grant and enabled them. It would have been a long time until we could have raised enough money to have done it. The finished walk looks great, and they thank us profusely. Second of all, every board member got the letter to the Museum of the Waxhaws. As you know, we got a proposal for shared a joint use and maintenance agreement, and at this point in time staff evaluated that, and we're not in a position need a programming or event space at this point in time, and but we'll keep the door open, but the letter will go out tomorrow. The change is you'll get a letter that has it copied to the commissioners and Greg as well. That was a typo on that. Other than that, at this point in time, we will I will entertain a motion to go into the first closed session, which is to discuss the acquisition of real property pursuant to N.C.G.S. 143-318.11A5, and we would like the town attorney, town manager, and the town clerk to join us.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
have nothing substantive to report from our closed session. And at this time, I will entertain a motion to go into closed session to discuss personnel per the statute that's referenced in the agenda that I can't seem to find right at the moment.
N.C.G.S. 143-318.11A6.
Thank you. It will just be board only, no need for the attorney, the manager, and the clerk.
So
Entertain-
moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Was there a need for me to wait till after the?
No.